watching Overdrive. Lexus has been selling the LX 500D in global markets for 14 years now without a single update. 14 years hence, it has decided to tweak the suspension a bit. It has also decided to make the SUV lighter and downgrade the engine from a V8 to a V6. How much of a difference does all of this make? Tuhin will tell us.
You're in the big league and a large luxury SUV is just the right accessory to stamp your authority wherever you go. But the usual crop of soft-edged SUVs just don't cut it with that hardened image that you've cultivated for yourself. What you need is a true blue 4x4. But you also need desirability and exclusivity, which is where the new Lexus LX comes in. If it's presence you're after, the Lexus LX has you covered, to say the least. It's right in the mix with other top-tier SUVs, but towers over everything else on the road, even though the proportions have been tweaked to become more like monocoque SUVs. Now Lexus calls this new design philosophy of its interiors Tazuna, which means controls which are within easy reach. And yeah, it is a bit intimidating at first when you step in with the sheer number of screens and buttons that greet you. There's, to start with, a 10-inch head-up display which is quite crisp. It's visible in all kinds of weather. And then you have quite a familiar Lexus digital instrument cluster with those round concentric designs that we've come to like so much. But again, to drive the point home that this is a true blue 4x4, you get dials which you don't see nowadays. For example, one for the battery voltage, one for the coolant temperature and the engine temperature, which is quite unique. And then you come to the usual 12.3-inch screen that you find in all new high-end Toyotas and Lexus. And this controls the navigation, your Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, your media, your phone, and just a trip computer. You have a driver control unit or something of that sort, is what Lexus calls it. So one screen will give you all the climate control functions for the front, for the rear. And then this other one which controls the drive function, so to speak. So you know exactly what the air suspension is doing, what drive mode you're in. There's a throttle map and an accelerator map and a G meter. You have a large chunky mode selector dial for the drive modes, again for the off-road modes as well. Now coming back to the climate control, Lexus goes a step further and gives you something called a climate concierge. Now this is really interesting because what this does is it won't just set the temperature and the airflow according to the climate that you've set or the temperature that you've set, but it'll also switch on, for example, the seat ventilation in this case. The design of the dash, like the outside, is a balance of functional restraint and flashiness. Except for the center stack with its lashings of gloss black, wood veneer and silver, it's generally simple horizontal shapes, all of which is soft to touch and fitted with a sense of robustness that seems it will last decades. Now, like we mentioned, the wheelbase of this generation hasn't changed, but you do get more knee and leg room because Lexus has scooped out the seat back off the front seats, which has freed up more space. You do have quite a good amount of headroom, even though you're seated quite high up as you would in one of these ladder frame SUVs. There's a useful recline function. You can recline it to quite a comfortable angle, and the cushioning itself is really quite supple. The amenities on offer enhance the experience further. You get sunshades which are sadly manually operated, but there are two screens here that offer all kinds of media support. Aside from this, there are separate climate zones for the back and heated and cooling functions for the bench. In terms of safety equipment, you get 10 airbags, TPMS, brake-by-wire and electronic stability control. You get blind spot monitoring, but the lack of significant ADAS functions at this price point is a miss. The LX is still one of the more capable SUVs you can buy when the going gets rough, although we don't think you'll be too adventurous in something this pricey. The approach, departure and ramp over angles have been retained from the previous versions, however. It also happens to run on all-terrain tires. As for off-roading hardware, you have the 4x4 system with the low ratio transfer case as well as a central differential lock. There are also quite a few terrain modes that alter the SUV's responses and also raise or lower the ride height. Other electronic functions are the crawl control feature, hill descent control and the turn assist feature that uses the brakes to tighten the LX's turning radius in rough situations. Now another big change with this generation is the new engine. The old 4.5 litre V8 diesel has been let go of and now you have a much smaller 3.3 litre twin turbo V6. Now don't be fooled by this much lower displacement. It feels exactly like how these diesel engines have felt in these big Toyota 4x4s. So again, you have quite that lazy, very calm demeanor. You feel like you have so much torque in reserve, there's so much performance still in reserve, it's just been kept away for the sake of longevity. It feels exactly like that. Lexus LX has become quite a brisk car. Now the new 10-speed gearbox also helps with this sense. It's really well matched to this engine. And even with these many ratios, it's never confused. It fades away in the background, which is always a good thing. Unlike the last generation, this new LX is actually reasonably efficient. You can expect close to 10 kmpl on the highway. Sticking to its tough 4x4 lineage, the new suspension in the LX still has a rigid axle construction in the rear. Now this new architecture has made the LX over 200 kgs lighter than before, and the center of gravity has been lowered. There's also a new air suspension. A lot of work has been done to make this much more manageable to drive in the ride and handling department. So over bad roads, it does everything that you would expect from a ladder frame SUV. It will just pummel through them like they don't exist. The faster you go, the better it seems to get. So you notice that the Lexus LX is always predictable. When you turn in, when you're on a winding stretch of road such as this one, you realize that you always know what the car is going to do. There are no surprises, there are no sudden movements. And then you have this new electronic power steering, which just rounds off the experience really quite well. Priced at Rs 3.39 crore on road, the LX goes up against some illustrious rivals. Most of these are lighter and based on monocoque architectures, which makes them just that bit more refined to drive, despite the significant gains that have been made with this LX. You can also get SUVs which feel plusher and more spacious inside. But what most don't give you is that sense of invincibility and dependability that the LX does so well. The LX feels like it'll outlast most of these SUVs, and that plastered a smile on our face for as long as we drove it.
With that, we've run out of time on this week's episode of Overdrive. But remember, you can stay in touch with the team through our various social media platforms, and you can write to us on YouTube as well. We'll see you next week. Until then, drive and ride safe.